Hi everyone, John here. I wanted to do a video response to Fiannawolf's video on the idea that villains are more interesting. I'll be sharing my thoughts on Fianna's positions, as I think I can highlight some reasons why so many people are drawn to the villainous characters more than the heroes, at least for this moment of time in our culture. I'll address Fianna's points as they come up. One of the points that immediately came to my attention was, the villain is put on a pedestal now, because they think it's easier to create stuff for them. So DC and Marvel's model for modern superheroes, eh? But jokes aside, I think I can explain the shift towards the idea of gravitating to the villain. I'll be touching on some psychology themes in the video, a little hint of what's in store for Instruments of War Volume 2. Many of us were told to be good people growing up and had good behavior modeled to us. There were few socially acceptable methods of addressing our problems. We were often told, keep a stiff upper lip, don't cry, keep it together, as examples. We were told that entertaining negative thoughts was a bad thing, and oftentimes this was a poor substitute for feeling the actual emotion, whether it be rage, anger, or sadness. This has obviously led to many people developing a wide array of personality issues and disorders over not being able to properly express their emotions or their inner turmoil. In essence, we were denied the opportunity to properly experience the emotion, or in some cases, to explore the darker aspects of our emotions. As we've learned over the past couple of decades, allowing someone to simply examine their emotions or feelings without guilt or judgment allows for introspection and understanding and the possibility of healing. However, the belief that you don't do this is still prevalent in society today, and my suspicion is that many people look to villainous characters in order to explore the darker aspects of what's happened to them in their lives. There are other explanations for this as well, but let's humor this for a moment. Everyone wants to view themselves as a good person and not someone who has an inner demon lurking within them. The truth is, we all have our dark sides, something psychologist Carl Jung has coined the Jungian shadow. The draw towards the villain could be explained as engaging with your shadow via a proxy, seeing what the villain does and either projecting yourself in a similar situation in their position, or simply entertaining your dark side in a way that doesn't involve you directly. Jordan Peterson warns of the dangers of not wrestling with your Jungian shadow, or understanding what can drive you to darkness. To paraphrase the professor, those that don't and encounter something horrendous will be surprised and overwhelmed by that event or tragedy. That's what produces evil. Someone who thought, it can't possibly happen to me, and are ill-prepared to face the darkness. Villains in most cases are symbolic of this. The Joker, Mr. Freeze, Baby Doll, etc. Ultimately, we as an audience want to see good win out against evil. But at the same time, we want to know why someone can fall, what it looks like, and to keep an eye out for it. As I've explained though, entertaining your Jungian shadow isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's about letting it out in short, controlled bursts and not allowing it to overwhelm you. Understanding what could drive you into a homicidal rage or to commit evil, and preparing to control yourself if a tragedy were to befall you. For others, the draw of the villain can be as simple as wish fulfillment or escapism. Or it could be how they would react if they were unburdened by societal decorum or morality. This could range from something like wanting to punch your boyfriend in the face for cheating on you, to something much darker. Boys and girls typically project into the hero that saves the day. But sometimes people want to be the villain. Whether that's the supervillain that tries to take over the world, the necromancer that tries to bring down an entire kingdom, the beautiful female assassin, or the pirate princess that kidnaps the main character and revels in pissing off his love interest. I digress. Is it easier to write villains? Not necessarily. Villains can be very difficult to write, and many authors end up creating one-dimensional characters, so it isn't a golden ticket by any stretch. Perhaps the question that should be asked is, are people finally opening up to their dark sides and more comfortable exploring them? Are they connecting with some villains because, compared to their superhero counterparts, they're more human? Obviously, I'm not encouraging authors to turn their works into villain protagonists, the genre. What writers should be more comfortable with is making a nuanced villain and developing the character to be more human, but ultimately still flawed and evil, or wrong about their stances and positions. The next quote that I came across in Fianna's video was, "I think it's sad that some people find it easier to build up a villain." You could probably tell that Fianna's a chipper woman, and as she admits in her videos, she gravitates towards the good. I do think it's a good thing that some people have an easier time building the villain. It makes it more challenging for them to create a hero to match. As I previously covered, one-dimensional villains that do heinous stuff for shock value, or because the author has a limited, violent imagination, only serve to create a weak story. There's a difference between a fanfiction tier revenge story and an actual story with a message, themes, an Aesop, and conflict between the two sides. To go back to the psychology aspect, it isn't necessarily bad for people to find it easier to build up a villain. On the contrary, some authors are good at writing good characters, others evil ones, and some are good at both. This can be a reflection of their life experiences, or simply, hey, I have a really good idea for a villain. Fianna and I are on the same page here, but where it becomes a problem is when hacks get involved or writers who are emotionally stunted and narcissistic. Worse is when they project their own villainous tendencies into a character and call them the hero. Wonder Woman from the abandoned Wonder Woman pilot immediately comes to mind. She could be seen as the progenitor to the villainous, self-absorbed superhero phase that was coming. It was like a superhero that was conceived by a child. She's a warrior princess and a CEO, and she gets to beat up criminals and do whatever she wants. And if people complain, she beats them up too. By the way, you should go check out SF Debris' video on the Wonder Woman pilot. I'll include it in the link down below. It's a good example of how not to write a hero. To conclude the point, though, it's not easy to write a villainous character, but people with villainous tendencies tend to do so, not because it's better, but because it's easier and more familiar with them. And as you may have gathered, easy doesn't translate to better. Just look at what Marvel and DC have done to their characters for proof of that. The next point I came across in Fianna's video was, if you have a heroic mindset, you bring people up. You don't bring people down. I get where Fianna is coming from, and I understand that she values likable over relatable. I mean, after all, nobody wants to read how Superman intentionally exposes himself to kryptonite just to get his laxatives to work. They read to see how he would deal with the world-ending threats, and how the spirit of man and patriotism can triumph over evil. At the same time, however, writers have to be careful that they don't turn their characters into pure paragons. There's only so much emotional abuse or torment that they can experience before they break or lash out at people. To touch on what I've covered at the start of the video, I don't think it's necessarily bad for a hero to have a dark moment, where they finally lash out at someone that has been abusing them, and stop that person from doing it anymore. In a heroic manner, though, rather than a villainous one. It's how they deal with this issue that determines whether or not they are truly a hero, or if they're just a villain in disguise. Too often, stories show people turning the other cheek or ignoring a villain's attempt to bring the hero down psychologically or emotionally. This may work in some instances, i.e. dealing with narcissists, but this can send the wrong message. Obviously, you don't pummel the person into oblivion unless they're directly threatening you or others, but you must stand up for yourself and confront this type of abuse. This is usually done in story through a "why you suck" speech. The last question that came up as I was watching Fianna's video was, why the draw to villains now? Well, I think it's no secret that we're in the middle of a cultural freefall. Many companies and IPs are producing absolute dreck, and many properties have grown stale. As Fianna has pointed out, many businesses are focusing on the villains now as the heroes are overplayed and overexposed. This left me to ponder why this was, and I went back and started reading some of the cultural documents that I've come across over my years when I was in university. One such work was Sir John Glubb in his studies of cultures that had come and gone. I questioned whether the idea of a societal collapse, as described by Glubb, could be applied to a culture's virtue as well, where he describes how a society inevitably turns on itself instead of confronting the barbarians at the gate. Could it be that we're being drawn to the villainous instead of the virtuous, as a symptom of a society in the withering embers of its life? Hardly. What's happening at Marvel and DC is evidence of this not being true. We've all seen what's happened to our beloved characters, whether it's Tony Stark being replaced by Riri Williams, a thieving narcissistic racist, morphing Captain Marvel into a sexist sociopath, or turning Superman into a joke of a father and a man. These attempts to belittle, demean, or otherwise create villainous heroes are being rejected by the audience. They are not drawn to villains that are branded as heroes. They want heroes that are heroes, and they want villains that are villainous. Good and evil, not different shades of crap or virtue signaling at the characters' and audience's expense. Given these companies' lack of skill nowadays, the oversaturation of villainous characters is a desperate ploy for sales, something Fianna has pointed out in the past. A story with a villain and no hero is boring. And a story that has nothing but dirtbags with no redeeming qualities will bring about negativity-induced apathy, which your story absolutely cannot have. And that's the video. Hopefully everyone enjoyed it. I'll try to have some more content out shortly, though I'm prioritizing completing Instruments of War Volume 2 right now. I'm going to get some friends to proofread it before sending it off to the beta readers, so hopefully we're able to iron out the bugs and get the first manuscript out to the beta readers so they can iron out all the major bugs. Then after that, it's off for editing. Anyways, take it easy everyone. See you next time.